Hey everyone, this is my presentation on the gut microbiome and its nutritional impact. So, to get started, what I'm going to cover in this presentation is the microbiome, the definition of the microbiome, the factors that influence it, and also its function. I'm also going to talk about the gut-brain axis, and I'm also going to cover the nutritional impact that's related to the microbiome. So when you have an unhealthy gut bacteria balance, what can happen nutritionally? Cultural differences and how different populations have different gut microbiomes based on their location. And also treatment for problems with your gut microbiome, and also discussion on how to move forward with that through a public health lens. So, defined, the gut microbiome is the balance of bacteria and other gut microbes that live within our GI tract. So, this affects everyone's health, but it's not fully understood how. So, we have a lot of information and a lot of data that is emerging about how this affects our health, especially nutritionally, but we're not completely sure and clear with certain diseases yet. So certain factors that influence the gut microbiome, we have age, which can change throughout the lifespan. Also nutrition, what a person eats and how that affects the balance of bacteria. The location, where the person lives and what is culturally normal for the food that they eat. Stress, supplements that the person takes, and certain medications can affect the gut microbiome. So our microbiomes are a lot like fingerprints. They are unique to each and every one of us. And like I said, they change based on the factors that I just mentioned above. So in the beginning of an infant's life, the infant is born with almost no gut microbiome, and a lot of this is established through how the baby was delivered, whether it was vaginally or through a C-section. When it's vaginally, then the baby is exposed to all this good bacteria that's able to then reside in the gut. And also with breastfeeding, if the baby is breastfed, that also helps establish the microbiome early on in life. And by age 3 is when most children have a pretty set microbiome that is similar to that of an adult microbiome. So the function of it is, first of all, it promotes immunity. And the way that it does that is it protects us against pathogens from getting into our body and making us sick. It also helps to digest our foods. And while it's digesting those foods, it's releasing the nutrients and absorbing vitamins into the body. And it also helps to ferment non-digestible carbohydrates. So the gut-brain axis is interesting. It's a communication between the gut and the brain, and it's a two-way communication. So I thought it was really interesting. You can see in the picture here how not only does the gut talk to the brain, and so based on our microbiome, it can influence our brain and things like if we feel full or what kind of foods we crave, but also the brain talks to the gut. So the brain, our thoughts and our brain chemistry sends messages to our gut and actually affects our microbiome. I thought that was really interesting. And so gut dysbiosis, as you can imagine, that's the imbalance of helpful and harmful bacteria in our gut. So that's when we have gut dysbiosis, that means when we can have nutritional impact and health problems at that point. So I'm going to go over some health issues that specifically relate to the nutritional impact when we have poor gut health, and that's going to include malabsorption, energy metabolism, obesity, IBD or inflammatory bowel disease, and diabetes. So malabsorption is when the body isn't able to take in the nutrients from foods that we eat. So it's like a faulty system in the body. So even if you were eating healthy food, if you had a malabsorption issue, you wouldn't be able to absorb those nutrients and vitamins from the food. So a recent study this year had looked at people who chronically drank alcohol and looked at their gut bacteria versus people that did not drink alcohol. And the results showed that the people that were chronic drinkers actually had a different type of gut microbiome, an unhealthy balance, and also many of them had suffered from malabsorption. And so in that situation, you can see how alcohol was directly causing, or at least one of the main factors that was influencing their gut health. So energy metabolism is when the body can't get energy from the foods that it eats. So kind of similar to malabsorption, the body isn't able to use what it's given. So with obesity, we know that that's an epidemic and that it's a worldwide epidemic. And especially in our country, our obesity epidemic with kids is a really big issue. And the microbiota may influence the brain's food craving. So that's another thing, like I said before, with the gut-brain axis, how our microbiota might be actually influencing what we're craving. Are we craving foods that aren't good for us? Are we craving things that are actually going to continue to damage our microbiome? Inflammatory bowel disease, which is different from IBS. Inflammatory bowel disease includes Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. So it's a pretty serious disease that often ends up people up in the hospital. They suffer from severe diarrhea and pain, and sometimes it can end in death if there's complications with IBD. And 1.5 million Americans suffer from this. And there's also research shows us this is an increasing number. And so we're not sure exactly what is increasing that number, but it's easy to think that it could be related to our nutrition. So diabetes, this is really interesting. New research, so within the past 5 years, a lot of research is showing that the microbiota plays a role in the early onset of diabetes. So research is showing us that they are trying to figure out which certain biomarkers that we can look at to see if when there is a change in the gut microbiome and how that can alert us way earlier if diabetes is starting to happen in the body. And at that point, if we can look at that and know that that's happening in the body, what can we do to maybe stop it in its tracks in that early intervention? So if we're able to change the gut microbiome at that point, could that maybe even reverse the diabetes from happening? And also, I'd like to talk about cultural differences in microbiomes. So like I said before, factors that influence is your geographical location. There was an interesting study that I had read for this paper that was about two different populations of children. One was European children, and the other population was rural African children. And their diets were significantly different. The rural African children were fed a diet rich in fiber and low in animal protein, and more had non-animal proteins in their diet. And then the European children, as you can imagine, had more of a westernized diet, more that you see, here in the United States. And their gut bacteria were significantly different. And the children from rural Africa actually had a healthier balance of a microbiome than the children from the European study. So talking about treatment for the microbiome, there are several main types of treatment at this point. Probiotics, which most people are familiar with, what that is supplements that provide the beneficial gut bacteria to help rebalance our bacteria. So if we do things, through stress or through poor eating or things like that, or through antibiotics or something that kind of wipes out our gut microbiome, then probiotics are a way to reestablish that good bacteria. And dietary changes is also a huge part of a treatment, and to look at incorporating more fiber into your diet, which the fiber actually feeds the beneficial bacteria, and lower saturated fat foods for your diet. And also fecal transplants are really interesting, and they're somewhat of a new thing, but what that is healthy stool is used to rebalance the gut bacteria. So they found out that stool is actually biologically alive, and it has all of this bacteria in it, and it's able to be used in a safe way. It's able to be put into another person's body in order to rebalance their gut bacteria. So thinking about education to the general public on the gut microbiome and how it affects nutrition, and thinking about a cultural shift that may have to happen for that. So educating the public on gut health, which is really important. I think the challenge with it is that we don't know everything, which can make it a little bit more tough to educate everyone exactly on how it affects our health, because sometimes we don't know. And I think it's difficult because it is a bit of an abstract thing, and it's literally on a microscopic level. So it's not like something we can see. So we think about, skin cancer. That's an easy thing to say. Don't get a sunburn, because then, you could develop skin cancer. It's a little bit more tangible, easier to think about. But with gut health, it is pretty abstract, and we don't know everything yet. So I think that makes it tricky. And also, to shift the food culture and nutritional lifestyle, we all know that can be challenging. But, especially when we have 24/7 availability to, high fat and high saturated fat and sugar foods and drinks and things like that, that can damage the microbiome. So something that I thought about was fortifying more foods and drinks with probiotics. So we see all the time the yogurts and the kombucha and just typical regular drinks and foods that you might see that says with probiotics. I think I saw chocolate the other day that said with probiotics. And so it is also a selling point, because a lot of people look for things like that. But is there a way that we can incorporate more of that into everyone's diet in general, by putting it in more foods and drinks? And obviously, ongoing research data is necessary to help understand this better and support the link between our gut health and our overall health, and how that affects us nutritionally. So for my references, and if there's any questions, please feel free to contact me at my information provided below. And I thank you all for listening. Thanks so much.